Good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Capital Improvement Program Committee to order. Tonight is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, 9/22/22. And we have one item on our agenda, which really is the core mission of our committee, which is discussion and possible action on regarding CIP prioritization and funding recommendation for the Finance Committee. This essentially is the third and last meeting for this year of the CIP committee that will prioritize some of the things that they've ranked, determine where we're at with funding, and then make a recommendation to the Finance Committee to insert these things into the 2023 budget. You'll recall at our last meeting, which seems like it was a long time ago, but we'd done our ranking, and those rankings are on the right-hand column of the sheet that was passed out. It's also in the packets that show how we prioritize the projects based on both the cost of delay and the urgency with which they need to be completed. And then at that point, usually we take the list and we draw a line at the point where the money runs out, and then we figure out if we have to move anything above or below the line. This year was a little bit special, and maybe not in a good way, that street projects are coming in bids so expensive that we were not able to remove one item from our list before we ran out of money. So we asked our finance department to go back and review first some prioritization, figure out what on the list could last, could go another year unfunded. In past years, we've been able to get a substantial portion of the list completed, but there have been years, and I want to say maybe in the mid-2000s, where we did really struggle, where economics were such that we couldn't get much done off the list. But we were still moving some projects forward. And I think we're kind of in that predicament now, knowing where we're at with, high bid costs and inflation. And so if we take a look at our projects, the highest scoring project for us was the Oak Island restroom renovation. And but there's a couple of recommendations I know that I think Mary Ann wanted to make about a few things that we should put on hold right away. Based on the fact that other phases of the projects are not ready to go. And I think the first one was the fleet facility for DPW, correct?
Yeah, so, they are struggling a bit finding the site, the preferred site for that facility. And in talking to Lisa, frequently these big capital projects where we're building a new building are taken kind of separately when they're ready to actually pull the trigger. The fire station was basically approved by council outside the CIP process. And so I was suggesting that we could do that. The other thing is, I suppose you could just keep it in there and, say we're going to borrow for it and,
At a future date?
Yeah.
Even
the budget cost is kind of up in the air right now because, the site is going to have a big impact on the cost.
As from the sound of it, if we end up with land acquisition costs versus using land we already own, that difference could be, that we could fall somewhere between $12 and $20 million, depending on what has to be done to either acquire land or clear land for new development, based on one of the sites that they're interested in. And, another site that they were interested in has become a little bit of a turf war, I think, with the neighborhood. So that said, I think that we're pretty far off from selecting a location. If I had to guess, just based on the activity of the SISM committee, I would say that they will be hard pressed to pick a location before the end of this year, just because they have a engineering firm taking a look at that site to determine the viability. And that said, by the time they would then design the building or finish the design and be ready to construct, we probably would not be financing the brunt of this until '24, right? We'd be another whole year. So, I think maybe what we should do is just put a pin in that and let the Finance Committee pick when the borrowing is right for that, like they did with the Firehouse number 2. They actually put an earmark in a future year's budget, knowing that the project was coming, but then they waited on the borrowing until they were ready to move it forward. So I think we could remove that item from our, I mean, we won't move it from our ranking, but we certainly wouldn't move it forward at this point because no one's ready. With regard to at least 2 or 3 of these airport items, normally they're in a situation where if we don't do our match, they will lose grant funding. And a lot of
Right.
these things are funded federally. I know down at the airport, they had moved a couple of these projects up based on the passage of the infrastructure bill, with these pavement things. And we just, a week and a half ago at the airport committee, heard from the airport manager and the engineer that consults on those projects that the wheels of dispensing those funds are turning painfully slow. So they're certainly hopeful that they can get to them. But I do feel like we have to be ready with our match if that opens up. Like if the gate opens up and they release the funding, we have to have our piece. And our piece on those, on the 2 highest scoring ones, looks like about almost 1.3 million between the, oh, well, no, one of those is bus replacement.
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, so the other one, 400,000 on his runway reconstruction and LED updates. And the other one that they had funding for was taxiway rehab and LED light retrofit. And that one, so 700,000 is those 2 airport projects. Do we know for sure if the airport has the ability to bank and carry over any of that money? Because if they're going to lose a grant, I think we have something different to consider.
Right. So John was reaching out to the FAA, and he had not heard back by the time of this meeting.
Okay,
So, again, you could recommend that to the finance committee, and, if
move it forward, and if
Yeah.
they find that it's acceptable to wait, they could wait?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you guys think on that? Move those 2 airport for sure? And is the same, we're kind of in the same situation with bus replacement. If he's
Yep.
got 80% federal funding, 892,606 is our piece of that. But that opportunity often doesn't come around twice either with that kind of funding.
Right.
So what do you guys think about pushing that one forward as well, the bus replacement?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd move the bus replacement forward.
Okay. And what do you guys think on the Oak Island restroom renovation? They had that prioritized high, but I don't think there's any other fund source involved there either.
Right.
It does give them some ADA access. Was some of that ARPA funded though, because it was ADA accessible? It was not.
isn't today, no.
Okay. As a fund source, given the fact that it encourages active outdoor activity and lifestyle, would it be a fit for ARPA as an alternative means of
You could
financing?
if you wanted to.
I just, when we look at this and we know that on the capital borrowing side, we're going to fall short if we can find other sources of funds. The skateboard park improvements, as an example, are coming out of rescue plan funding because they encourage outdoor activities. This enhancement to Oak Island may actually do the same thing, both for outdoor activities and outdoor events. And then it also, I believe, adds some ADA accessibility that they don't really have today because we're barely or not compliant down there. I guess maybe if we would send that forward and just ask the finance committee to consider it for ARPA, they would rank it. They have their own rating matrix for that. And then on the IT side, also ranked high from IT was the security incident event monitoring subscription. And I know when we had the IT director here, he was very concerned about things like ransomware, which are more common than ever.
I believe this is going to be an ongoing cost,
It is, okay.
right?
Um,
And so, one of the discussions we had
It's a
at
subscription
CIP
fee, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that we should send it over to the operating budget rather than considering it CIP.
I agree, almost like the equipment replacement fund type stuff. I mean, if it's recurring and they have to have it, like we do with all the other software subscriptions.
It's about 47,000 annually.
Oh.
47,000, okay.
Okay, so
maybe
really
this-
it was kind of a misnomer that it's 188 on here because this typically is just the 1 year
We did the
cost.
total project cost.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's 47, you said?
yeah.
Yep.
So we could adjust that cost to 47 and send that forward if you guys are interested in forwarding that for,
And can it still go to the
Operating.
other operating budget?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finance could slot it in there.
It's 47,231 a year, and that's spread out for 4 years for a total of 188,
Yeah.
Okay.
so.
So that we could probably absorb into the operating fund with, just like we do equipment and things, right? And the other subscriptions that they maintain for the cloud hosted things. Okay, and so then if we talked about the fleet facility, we'll put a separate pin in that, taxiway lighting. Okay. Then we come to the part of the list where I start to feel like some of the stuff we see is nice to have, but maybe not necessarily condition critical. West Side redevelopment riverfront property, I mean, would we love to have control of the development of the MBX site? Probably, but I don't know that financially we're in any position to afford $2.8 million like today. So,
Is that property for sale now, or is this something that we're hoping it's going to come on the market soon?
come on up, Randy, and talk to us about that. I mean, if there was an alternate fund source,
Yeah.
I'd certainly consider it, but there just isn't.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
Yes, it is for sale right now, but it's really a soft sale. They're not pushing it too hard at this point, but there is a flyer going around that they did have it posted for sale. And it's been for sale for some time, I think going back to March, even maybe further into last year. So I don't
But it's
know that
not publicly listed through a Realtor or anything?
it's listed through Schofield Group.
Okay,
But I haven't seen it show up on any of the public places that you would typically be looking for, but they did have a flyer out on the property.
Okay.
And that's who I've been contacting in terms of learning about the property and what's available.
okay, Carrie,
I'm a realtor, so it's probably on LoopNet,
okay.
which is just a
Commercial hub,
set of-
like MLS for commercial, basically? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that said, though, that site, I think, is a challenge for a lot of different projects, just because of what it's been there for such a long time. I mean, it is on rail spur, but, you know, I guess I'd be hard pressed if there was a ton of offers just pouring in on that particular property, because it's oddly shaped. It's a little bit access restricted.
There's going
So-
to be a lot of remediation, too.
There could be environmental concerns there. There could be, you know, generations worth of sawdust and other pollutants and things we don't even know.
Yeah.
So we're probably okay to hold on that, I think, right? I mean, you know that someday we'd love it, but this year it just seems like it's not the time.
It's located inside a TID, and that might be, that might be an opportunity, too, you know, once we kind of, you know, some of these other developments, once we
Get some increment out of them.
we get our arms around, you know, what we're doing right now downtown. That would be another thing we can move forward.
Sure, something to look at, right? I mean, then we've got, next down the list, at least in our scoring, DPW garage door replacements year one, that's $30,000. It ties into a little bit of the other two items where facility repairs, you know, we've got a number of facility repairs that we've left sit for a while. Two that are marked condition critical are City Hall concrete and concrete veneer repairs. That the back steps basically is part of it, and then the aesthetics, I think, out front was rolled into it. Those steps have been on the CIP, this is probably the fourth or fifth year. You know, I mean, it's essentially an emergency access route out of the building. It's not a primary access point for anybody, not even the employees. So, you know, I guess, does one more year on that really create a devastating situation? They're rough. I mean, there's in spots, the edge of the stair tread is like missing. There's some rebar showing on them. I mean, they're far from perfect. But, you know, we're already, I mean, assuming we wanted to keep our debt issue at between our debt issue and the levy, we want to stay just over $3 million. We probably did we have 3 million in road projects before we even got off the ground? I think.
Yes.
So our recommendation already, or the stuff we sent forward already, just for our share, we'd already be looking at recommending that the finance committee consider likely borrowing more than they traditionally do. I mean, towards the capital projects, right, to get these done. So, you know, ordinarily, if they'd borrow 3 million, I guess we have to see what this stuff adds up to, but, assuming that on the bus replacement, is there CARES funding available for any of that? Because, they had some they were using for their operating costs, I know, but is there,
I think he had outlined what he was going to use for his CARES money, and that, this
and
would
this
be net
wasn't
of
it?
any of,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and we borrowed out of their fund last year, so I mean, either way,
Right.
we owe them, so,
Yes, so the veneer repairs on City Hall are on the roof.
Okay.
And the concrete repairs, as you mentioned, are
It's
the
those stairs?
stairwell.
okay.
What's this?
I don't know.
Not good.
Yeah.
DPW garage door replacements, it looks like that's a multi-year project. It's marked as year one. I mean, I would assume that even if we build a fleet facility, that the facility they currently have is going to remain in service in some capacity for something, whether it's equipment storage or whatever. I mean, it's not like we're working on a building that isn't going to last long, because I think that stuff's still going to stay in service. If they're to a situation from a facility standpoint, where they are either constantly malfunctioning or needing a lot of maintenance work, or if they are creating a situation that's dangerous down there, I think that's maybe something we need to know as well. Do you know, Dustin, if those doors are,
Yeah, a lot of the garage door, ooh, gosh, sorry. A lot of the garage doors in our west garage, we actually recently just had one that half fell down. We had to go in there with a lift and resupport it and get it repaired. They're just rotten and falling apart. So we are having a lot of issues with them.
okay,
And that was the goal, is to go through and work through and get them all replaced.
sure,
So there's, I'll use the lot.
Yeah, oh yeah, we use them
All
just about
day.
every day, yep.
yep, okay. Let's just see if there's anything else on this list that, the GIS oblique imagery update, that was, was that what, multi-year aerial photography, right?
Yes.
And so we're probably in the midst of that project. They had that marked at critical at 55,000. Some of the other things, though, Sylvan Hill parking lot has been on CIP for like 5 cycles. So has the Memorial Park seawall. Let's see. Airport has concrete and asphalt apron rehab and reconstruction, and they've got 95% grant funding on that. Our share's 37.5. I think that's another, same as the other situation at the airport, where if they're looking at losing 95% funding. And if we would send these forward and the airport manager finds out that those funds are either delayed or put off to another year, I think the finance committee and he can adjust their projects, and shift them off to other years. Is there anything else on here that won't keep? Firehouse 3 roof replacement is marked medium. Station 3 Apparatus Bay Repair. What else do we have? Sit-stand desks. Those are also on hold I think those also were requested for ARPA, and they've been placed on hold.
Yes.
Council chambers video and room upgrades, while we would love them, I feel like that's something that we're functional enough right now with, if we're lean on cash, we're certainly functional enough. Automated license plate readers service, the police department received a grant from the state for training and equipment and safety things, and they actually are able to get those cameras through another source. And so that 257, we won't have to worry about. They found other funding before we even made our decision. We just found out about that last week in the finance committee. And then some of these other things, I think also will keep. Land acquisition for Firehouse 1, that actually also is on hold in the ARPA funding. They've requested ARPA for that as well. And we just put it in a, I think, the finance committee. I think also will keep. Land acquisition for Firehouse 1, that actually also is on hold in the ARPA funding. They've requested ARPA for that as well. We just put it in a, I think, the finance committee. I think also will keep. Some of these other things, I think also will keep. put it on a wait list to see what else comes in for ARPA before we spend it on something like that. And then some of these other things really are aesthetic. The city council device refresh, I don't think anybody's iPad's equipment is not working. You know, I mean, we don't have as hard a use of those items as what staff computers and stuff get, so I feel like that could probably wait.
Yeah, I think the big concern with pads is that they, when they get too old,
They go out of support,
they go out of support.
yeah.
But I think we could probably get another year out of them.
I would think, and then also depending on, you know, we don't even know if everyone has the same model, because, you know, like the new members, if they were issued the models that previous members had, they may have newer or older models than those of us who just got the refresh like last
Yeah,
year.
I think we
too.
got refreshed. Didn't we get refreshed?
Was
like
it 2 years?
around the end of 2020, maybe?
I think maybe, because we had to bring them all in and get a new one. So they're not that old, and they seem to work. I mean, if an individual one isn't working or something, I'm sure they can figure out a solution, but no one has been complaining that their stuff doesn't work, that
Yeah.
I've heard. So then we could essentially leave the rest of this list, I guess, if we would forward to finance, and then they can kind of line up the fund source too, right? Go ahead, Carrie.
The public safety building flat roof replacement, is that the facility maintenance where they're trying to develop the new property? Would that be the same?
That's the
fleet,
police
or is that-
department's building.
Okay, so it's police, not fleet?
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yep,
Because I know flat roofs, you can patch them, you have to patch them a lot.
Right.
When they get ready to go, but if it's something that's not gonna be
right.
used.
And that building was built when, 97 or 8? I mean, they've been doing some work on it, I think, but he doesn't have it marked critical. Not that we want things to get critical before we handle them, but in a situation like this where we have to really dial down our choices.
But they can patch pretty well until
Right.
it starts coming apart at the side seams.
I think
Right.
if I remember, it was shrinking enough that it wasn't covering the edges.
pull away was
completely.
starting?
It's starting to pull away from the
Okay.
edges.
Yeah,
Well, then that probably needs to be handled. That would be critical, I would think.
I don't remember how critical, but, because he's just got it listed as high, end of life.
right.
It's, the existing roof material shrinks over time, would also lead to roof. It sounds like it's almost to the point, but not quite.
Not quite. So we
Yeah.
could probably squeak out one more year.
Yeah.
I think if we get over the hump kind of with what we've seen on some of these road construction bids and on, well, fuel costs, which is a big portion of the road construction stuff, and some of the inflationary pressures, hopefully next year we'll be in a better spot. I mean, the finance committee really can figure out the fund source if they want some of it from TID or ARPA or project
Right.
savings or whatever they want to do. I think if we just get them a recommendation for what projects they should consider, you know, I was intrigued by the idea of the leaf vac truck when we first had that presented. But given our financial situation, I just don't know that we can get it. I mean, it's $270,000, and we don't have an alternative fund source there. And the approach that we've been taking works. It's certainly not optimal, you know, but it may work well enough for one more season to get us, you know, we could look at something different for 24's projects then maybe.
Yeah, I did a crude calculation, and if we remove the maintenance facility Phase 3, the West Side Riverfront redevelopment, seawall, will come in, we end up right about at GIS oblique imagery. So if you remove the leaf truck too, you could probably get a lot further down the list. Yeah, a little further down to probably about,
So if we remove
down to the
the,
Riverside parking lot reconstruction.
okay, so let's get rid of West Side Riverfront redevelopment property, fleet facility. That
yeah,
does
and-
get
yeah,
us the
And
con-
if Oak Island goes to ARPA and we reduce the security to 47,000 instead of the whole 188.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But does that then also get us because we took the seawall out,
yeah.
Sylvan Hill parking lot out. Did we we held off on Station 3's roof because it was only medium, right? Fire Station 3's roof?
No, it says high, doesn't it? Or
It
am
says
I reading
medium
that
for
wrong?
50,000.
No, that's,
Oh.
fire,
That's high.
Station 3 is medium.
Oh, yeah, medium at 50,000. So
Oh,
I feel like that's a future need. I mean, if we wait on that, that then does get if we take the leaf vac out, that gets us our,
so the GIS imagery update? Why is that important?
because they use it to generate maps for projects and for street and road projects. And so every so many years, you have to have new aerial photography. Well, we partner with other entities to do that and to pay for the flyovers and whatnot. For some reason, I thought that the county planning office and us were doing it together, right? Where
It's actually City of Schofield.
Schofield, okay, so it's mid-project. It takes like 2 or 3 cycles to do it. And so if we're in like year 2, we almost can't drop out in
Oh,
year
so we
2
have to
because
do
they
it.
may have already started.
Okay.
The last time they did it, for some reason, I thought it was 3 years worth. Like we split the project into
Because
3
to
years.
me, I would think that that's something that could wait. Because how
Yeah,
different
it's-
is it? I mean, how old are the GIS pictures? Because they update them.
It's a 5-year, it's a 5-year rotation, but it takes 3 years to do an
To do 'em.
entire, to do them all. But I think if I remember correctly, doing it midstream like this, after 3 years, gives you updated imagery, because every time you do it, it's a snapshot in time. And if there's a lot of development going on, the imagery goes out of date really quick.
Right.
So so a lot of development, new imagery gives you a better understanding of
Right.
what's going on
And
for
so in the
planning.
area where we have a lot of progress, like on the business campus west end and on the core near
Yeah.
the river, those images are probably already antiquated then, since the other stuff has built out there and,
And FEMA may require some of this imagery too. It's just, I don't, it's,
I don't know how they get their images for flood mapping.
yeah, because if your imagery goes too old and there's a disaster,
Right.
FEMA's may not pay out depending on.
I just didn't know how old ours was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember paying for it over 3 cycles, but I don't know how many cycles ago we began.
Yeah. It seems like every year for CIP, we're talking about imagery.
Imagery of some kind, yes. And I want to say maybe it was 2015 or 16 when they started.
The book says that the current imagery is from April 30th, 2020.
2020, okay.
Okay.
I mean, that doesn't seem obviously things have changed a little bit, but
Right, but if this would be restarting that project for the next 3-year cycle,
Yeah, it would-
maybe they could hold off for 1 year.
Yeah.
Can we check with Eric on
Sure.
that?
it's just, if there was money, that'd be great, but if
Yes.
we're trying to
Well,
take away money.
And maybe what we'll do is we'll hold it, if we could agree to hold it off of our recommendation, if we find out through Mary Ann's conversation with Eric that they either desperately need it or that it's mid-project, they could shoot it back to finance in addition to our stuff.
Okay.
If that works. Because then that would get us Oak Island's restroom, bus replacement, the runway project at the airport, the security incident monitoring subscription, taxiway rehab at the airport, the garage door replacement at DPW, the city hall concrete work, the concrete and asphalt apron repairs at the airport, and the oblique imagery, right? And that was kind of where we stopped.
But where are we at with the Fire 3 roof replacement?
That was rated medium.
Oh, medium, okay.
Yeah, so I had marked that out because it wasn't
it.
rated even high. I think in future years, we'll see it
But what about the
prioritized, but
Station 3 Apparatus Bay Repair? Oh, yeah. That one was important, right? Was that the one he was talking about?
it's garage bay repairs. Let's see here.
Bob is here too.
Yes. Come on up, Chief. Talk to us about Apparatus Bay Repairs. Refresh our memory.
Sure. So what we've got going on there, the floor inside that apparatus floor has been spalling for a number of years, and the drains are now heaving. The drains have been rusted. We've got trip hazards out on that apparatus floor. So what we looked at was the repair of those drains. Actually, we're doing a drain repair right now at Station 1. This is a common thing. They're quite expensive to get repaired. In that, then they're going to patch the drains, or repair the old drains. It was too expensive to buy new drains. Patch that concrete, and then we're going to have the floor epoxied so it would seal that concrete, and we're not going to have to deal with this problem for many, many years. Then on that, while we're at it, we would applied for a federal grant for a washer extractor for turnout gear.
Okay.
We were going to demolish an area, a corner in that apparatus floor for the installation of the turnout gear washer and dryer, and then the installation of new lockers in there, and we were going to paint the apparatus floor. We could turn this into a 2-year project, do the floor. Those floor drains really need to get worked on, and that epoxy needs to go down. We could probably then wait on the federal funding to see if we get that. It's an AFG grant for the washer extractor dryer, which is 24,000 of that, I think 109
Yep.
we had on there. And maybe we hold off on the paint for another year, paint the floor. It's really essential we get those floor drains repaired.
Sure.
I can't remember if I had to put the breakdown in there of what each of them
It
cost.
was just at 109,000, so.
Yeah, that was everything, and so I think.
So were you
it-
thinking at like 75, you could get the drains and the floor and then wait on the rest of it?
Yeah, 75, we take care of the drains, we do the epoxy on the floor. Maybe we've got enough to start the locker project and bridge it into a 2-year project. Probably the painting the apparatus floor was quite expensive. We would then wait for another year. I mean, not the floor, but the ceiling. If you've ever been in there, it's a very tall, peaked
Right.
concrete
Yeah.
structure, and so it hasn't been painted in probably 20 years. Very dingy from the diesel exhaust, so we would wait maybe until next year, resubmit on CIP for that paint project.
That sounds,
And, we could make that work, but the drains really are a high priority. They're a trip hazard. We're not happy with them, so.
Well, and I think resealing that concrete ultimately will increase the serviceable life of Station 3 in general.
That's the goal,
And
yes.
so, I mean, to keep that in service as long as we can.
The station's
So-
in good condition. I don't have Leo here. He had submitted on the roof. I would agree that we could probably make it another year on that roof, my amateur viewpoint of it. I'm not a professional roofer. I'll just say that as a disclosure. But I think that we waited a year on that, address the floor drains as a higher priority, and then some of that funding we'll spend it, as best we can to get it as far as we can this year. Then we will know what we need to submit for next year.
Well, right, and then if the grant comes through too, we'll know a little more clearly what to look for then, so.
Yes.
So if we would change that 109.3 to 75, where does that put us with a total of projects being forwarded?
So what did you decide on the GIS?
We left it in.
Oh, okay. So
For
you'd have the
55.
GIS,
Yep,
75 for Station 3.
yep,
Then we go up to.
to
the-
37.5 for the apron project.
Yep. And then the 2 concrete repair and the garage door.
Yes,
And then,
and then no on the 2.5 million
yep, and then the taxiway rehab.
was the 300.
Yep.
And then no on the 16.
Yep.
and then-
47
Yep.
on the incident.
Then 400.
400.
And then 892 and 205.
Okay. We
So
can do that.
where does that add
Oh.
us up to, roughly, in round numbers?
Okay, yeah, put it in there. Should I read them to you?
Sure.
205,
Okay.
893, 400, 47, 300, 30, 80, 50. Did we say that yes
No,
to the?
37.5.
Yeah, so 38, 75, 55.
Yep, that's the tail end then.
1.173.
Okay. And so can you, those, can you see what the 893, the 400, and the 300 come up to?
893, 400,
And 300,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's 1.593.
Okay. So the timing of that is, at this point, not clear, because Greg did tell us, like, he's not going to need the money for his buses till 2024, for sure.
Right.
He ordered, because it's a one-year turnaround for
Right.
ordering.
Okay, and so that's half of it, basically. Well, it's more than half of it, actually. And
Okay.
so, I think if we're comfortable sending forward those projects to finance, knowing that the timeline is iffy on those grant-funded ones, that may solve part of our problem. We can look at ARPA eligibility for at least that Oak Island project.
Right.
I don't know if any of the rest of it fits. The cybersecurity thing might, I don't, unless, well, and if it's in the equipment fund, maybe it doesn't matter. And then,
Really like way down on the list, the city hall shutters, like if you're fixing the city hall, everything else, it would just make sense to get all of that
Yeah,
stuff on in 1 year.
well, and that's something too that we could maybe look at either for carryover or project savings, because it's only 25,000. And normally, and what we could do too is at the end of the year, depending on how we come out, or depending on if any of this other stuff doesn't pan out, then we can come back to the list and pick and choose other projects
Sure.
too.
Because if it's getting a facelift, it would be nice for it to just, that's the
Like, just
natural
finish
thing
it?
and
Yeah.
just be done with it.
Yeah. It's maybe a good idea to just put a little check mark by that, just in case there's a way to get it. And then, we'll see where we're at, how far off we are on our $3 million borrow, because, could we recommend that the finance committee increase their borrowing a little bit under the circumstances economically, given the situation of everything? Yes. But if not, in the past, we have tried to compromise so that stuff gets done everywhere. And in the past, we have cut a street or two. I mean, they're doing fewer streets than they've ever been able to based on the cost of everything, but, not to say that anything's off the table, but we're certainly trying not to cut infrastructure, because that really is what, out in the streets, everyone's complaining about. So, streets and water are the top two, so, okay, so are we good with sending that list forward the way we've developed it here? And then Mary Ann can provide that to finance with their budget workshops, and they can start to work in a plan for how to pay for it.
Awesome.
Okay, you guys comfortable with that? Does someone want to make a motion then to forward to finance the list of projects as discussed on the committee floor?
So move.
Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Marhold. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay. For or opposed or with? Did you vote for? You voted for. Okay, all right, so that passes through 3-0 with one member absent. So then, that's all we had on our agenda.
Yep.
So I will take a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Okay, so motion by Martin, second by Marvel. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one ever is. We'll stand adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.